Hello, gentlemen, barbarian savages, roosters here, and I'm starting my third video here in the Gyno Planet series. We already talked a little bit about gynocentrism. We already talked about feminism, the golden uterus, self-actualization of women over time, and the production of babies. So what happens when you put women and children first through the society, and government helps, and men get on board with it, and women and children first? Well, what eventually starts to happen is you'll see colleges fill up with women. 60% of the population in colleges now is women. 52% of the overall population of the planet is women. But fundamentally, what happens is you get more people in general. Because as we know from our feminism and from our gynocentrism videos, women's self-actualization is the golden uterus and having babies. Okay? It's not about sex for them. Okay? Men's evolutionary strategy is sex and the sex drive. Women's evolutionary strategy is to have babies and have lots of them. So what does that lead to? Okay? Overpopulation and scarcity of resources. And that's where we're at right here. So we're going to talk about this today. Okay? Overpopulation, scarcity of resources. All right? Let's start from long time ago. Thomas Robert Malthus. He wrote a book in 1798 called The Principles of Population. Okay? The thesis of his book and the basis of his book is that food expands linearly in a finite system, but population expands geometrically. Now, what does that mean? I came equipped with a freaking awesome graph. I know you guys love my freaking 1975 graphics, but here you got it. Here's Malthusian's theory, right? Along the bottom, you have the population curve right here. And that's a geometric expansion. And everybody knows what a linear expansion is. And that's this line right here. This is your food. Your food just goes up linearly. Well, what do you see happens at about 9 billion people on the planet is you run out of food. Holy fuck. This is elitist Eddie, the eagle. Elitist Eddie says, I'll still have food because I'm fucking rich. That's true, Eddie. But most of the planet is going to start to starve. 9 million people. That's what he predicted over 200 years ago. Okay, remember, this was written in 1798. This is like George Washington times is when he came up with this theory. Okay? So they've known about this for a while. All right? And there's other lines on here, and I'll get to those. But the fundamental basis of this, and I want you to remember this number, is he predicted this number over 200 years ago, 9 billion people. Okay? When I was born in the 60s, there were 3 billion people on the planet. Just in my lifetime, my 50 years on the planet, the population of our planet has more than doubled. From when I was a little itty bitty baby until the grown ass man that you see me now, in just that time span, which is that fast, it's more than doubled. There's over 7 billion people on the planet. What have I seen over my lifetime? I've seen Nice, easy prices, easy gas prices, cheap food, cheap milk, cheap cheese, cheap fucking chicken feed, horse feed, cheap grain, everything cheap, everything plentiful. I mean, with the exception of the gas crisis in the early 70s when I was about 8 or 9 years old, it's been a cornucopia until about the last 15 years. As we approach that 9 billion number, and you can see it, more and more and more and more people starving. When I was a kid, you never saw commercials for Ethiopia and stuff like that on TV for little kids starving and stuff like that. It just didn't happen. There was enough food and enough resources to go around. And for you millennials out there that were born in the 2000s, you've never experienced a world like that. You've never experienced a world where you don't worry about water or gas or anything like that, right? So that's the basis of this. Now, there's people that have come along over those next 200 years. Paul Ehrlich was one of them. He wrote a book called The Population Boom, and that was like right around 1968 when there was 3 billion people. And he talked about population outstripping the agricultural growth, right? And he predicted that in the 1970s and the 1980s, there'd be widespread starvation and disease. And it happened. 1985, Ethiopia had one of the worst droughts in the world ever. And I know some of you millennials, it was 15 years before you were born, but it was bad. And a lot of people died. A lot of little babies died and all that stuff, right? Now, after Paul Ehrlich came along, there was a guy named Julian Simon that came along. And his prediction was, and a lot of economists went along with this, was that technology would eventually help agriculture out to the point where they could grow enough food, and with the advent of computers and computer farming and robotics and stuff like that, that technology would make it so that we could make more food, okay? And this is where this line comes along. Right here. This is with technology, the little dotted line. Well, what you see happen is that actually did happen. Technology helped increase the food, and it increased the level to where population would take it over to about 10 billion. Now, here's the thing that Julian Simon didn't take into account, is that technology is there. It's just not every scientist in the world is working on making corn grow faster or making harvests bigger. Okay, that was kind of his assumption. Julian Simon didn't take into account that, there's a whole bunch of other scientists and technologists that are working on curing cancer and stopping AIDS and curing diseases and getting rid of midgeworms and, getting rid of parasites in Africa and all this stuff. So while technology was making farming easier, bigger yields and all that stuff, better food, supposedly, it was also curing a lot of diseases, and it was increasing the birth rate, decreasing the death rate of children that were being born, and increasing life expectancy. When I was first born, 100 years ago, life expectancy was around 48 years old. Which, like right now, I'd be dead already, right? 100 years ago. When I was born, life expectancy was around 68, right? And it's gone up. I can remember it being 72, and I think it's around 80 now, or 80, maybe even higher, maybe like 83 or 84. So life expectancy keeps going up, okay? You got to feed those people. If they don't die when they're 48, they live another 40 years. You're adding a whole nother bale of hay that they got to be fed for another 40 freaking years. So what did that do? Well, that increased this line exponentially, right? So the longer that you can increase medicine, stuff like that, that technology, the longer those people are going to live, right? Then there was a guy named Garret Hardin that came out, and he was a hardcore guy who's kind of like the MGTOW thing, make your own lifeboat. He came out with the lifeboat theory, which is if the people are in the water, if they're drowning, if they're starving in Africa, don't extend their lives. Let them die. Because what you're effectively doing is, by giving them resources and extending them and making them live longer, you're draining more resources that you can use for yourself and your offspring in the future. And it's basically, the Sahara theory, life or not the Sahara, the African theory, survival of the fittest. Instead of survival of the richest, which is what we have now in our society, actual survival of the fittest, old, weak, disabled animals in the jungle don't survive. They get eaten by lions and tigers. So that was kind of Garret Hardin's. And then, of course, Barry Commoner came out in the 70s with his book, and it was about poverty and how poverty affects it. And that's how we got to the Sustainable Development and Agenda 2030, which I've done an entire thing on that on my black belt thing. I talked about Agenda 2030 and what they're going to do with that. But fundamentally, what this population problem came down to is environment, affluence, and technology, right? So the environment where you live in, if you can't grow food, you're not going to have any food. You're going to die. Affluence was the idea that you can buy your way out of starving to death, and technology is you can technologize your way out of starving to death. But even with all of those things, still, 10 billion is the best we can do. So I want you to keep that number in your head for future, because right now we're sitting at almost 8 billion, right? We're getting close to 8 billion. It's like 7.6 or something like that. So what does this have to do with gynocentrism, feminism, and all that stuff? Well, to begin with, the reason that we're here is because of having babies. Unless we find a way to short circuit women's evolutionary strategy that is hardwired in their heads to have babies at all costs. You won't have a baby with me, I'll monkey branch to the next guy. He'll have a baby with me. He won't have a baby with me or can't have a baby with me. I'll monkey branch to the next guy, monkey branch to the next guy. When you think about yourself as a man and think about your sex drive is about 9 times stronger than a woman's sex drive. Their drive to have a baby is 9 times stronger than your desire to have a baby. Okay? Their desire, their evolutionary desire to have that little creature is 9 times stronger than your idea that you have in your head. Okay? So, that's what caused this. Now let's talk about some of the outcomes of that. What is the effects of overpopulation? Okay? Global warming. You got this whole thing of global warming. Oh, come on, Rooster. You're really stretching it here. I'm not stretching it. Burning of fossil fuels. Okay. Women refuse to separate economy from ecology. If it comes down to, I want a new pair of shoes or I want to save the whales, women will always choose the shoes. They got to have their electricity. They got to have their comfort Remember, the two things that women cannot stand is things that are disgusting and things that are uncomfortable or discomfort to them. Okay? Not having any whales doesn't affect them directly right now. Okay? They say, burn, baby, burn those fossil fuels, fuck solar, fuck wind. I want my electricity, I want my air conditioning, I want my freaking cold iced tea latte out of the refrigerator when I freaking want it. Okay? Women refuse to separate economy from ecology. Okay? Do men do that too? Yes. But men can see the freaking light. They're grown-ups. They're adults. They can think logically. Holy fuck. I need to figure out a different way to freaking do this. And I can go without for a little while until we figure out how to do this so that I can survive later on. Okay? Snowstorm's coming. I might want to buy some snowshoes and some cold weather gear instead of some high heels so that I can look pretty. Okay? Women won't conserve electricity or AC or any of that stuff because of comfort. Men will go through discomfort as long as it entails longer survival. Okay? So burning of fossil fuels is all of that. Industrial agriculture, right? Factory farms. Pesticides, right? 95 to 98% of pesticides reach other than the target species that they're trying to kill. They go into our water, they go into our soil, they go into bottom sediments in our lakes, and they stay there for years and years and years. Why? Women gotta have their thing right now. They're not going to go out and collect berries. They're not going to go hunting. They're not going to eat sustainably. They want their chicken McNuggets on Wednesday night, and they want them now. Okay? They want convenience. They want it easy. They don't want to freaking work. Okay? They want to get up and go to work and play work and get a paycheck so that they can buy chicken McNuggets. Okay? Because that's easy. It's easy for them. Okay? Also, these pesticides, they're making super weeds and super bugs. Every 10 generations or 10 years of using these pesticides, the weeds and the bugs, they go through the same thing that we go through in evolution. They evolutionize their way into immunity to these things. Okay? So this causes farmers to have to put more pesticides and make bigger factory farms. Okay? And the other thing with factory farms is now we have parasites coming back. These chickens are kept so close together, and cows are kept so close together and packed into such tight land areas that they're developing parasites that can be transmitted onto human beings, right? Okay? And the thing behind this is what I call the who's going to feed my kids thing. Okay? Whenever anything hard comes up with food or farming, or we may, this may become expensive, or, we can't do this because of the economy, or not the economy, because of the environment or whatever, because down the line it's going to affect later generations very badly. You always inevitably get the same freaking thing from women. Who gonna feed my kids? Well, it's not our fucking job to feed your kids. It's your job to feed your fucking kids. Stay home from work, get a fucking garden, grow your own shit, hunt for your fucking food, lady, and feed your kids that way, okay? But to put this responsibility on all the freaking men out there to feed your kids, okay, it's bullshit. You're destroying our planet because you won't freaking do the right thing, because you can't do the right thing because your freaking brain is wired gynocentrically, okay? The other thing about that, besides the who's going to feed my kids thing, is every time you go past a homeless guy on the street, and it's almost always a homeless guy, you'll see signs that says, will work for food, right? Because men will fucking work for food. Have you ever just find a sign for me anywhere where there's a woman that's homeless and she's holding up a sign that says she will work for food? Because she won't. She'll sell her pussy to get food, but she's not going to fucking work for food. Okay? She's not going to go back and pick berries. She's not going to farm. She's not going to do anything that's hard. She just wants fucking money. And she wants somebody else to bring her that money and bring her that resources. And that's you, buddy, because you're in the yoke. Okay? So this is all how we got here, and this is the reason that we can't get out of this. We cannot get out of this because women's brain set and our gynocentric culture won't let us do the right thing to get out of it. Okay? What's another thing? Deforestation. Okay? The forests that we have, overpopulation is going to change our forests. They're being completely depopulated, right? Forests affect our climate. They balance our atmospheric gases so that we can fucking breathe. They stabilize rainfall. They keep droughty places from being too droughty and rainy places from being too rainy. Okay? They put a little bit of rain in the droughty places and they dry out the freaking monsoon areas at least half of the year, so you can grow stuff. But women want new houses. They want teak decks. They want Brazilian freaking wood, right? For their new kitchen floors, okay? It's a status thing. It's all status. There is a complete oversourcing of new houses. And there is a ton of old houses. There's houses from the 20s, from the 30s, from the 40s, from the 50s in Detroit, Pontiac, Flint, Saginaw. Women won't live in them, right? These houses are perfectly good houses. Go in, renovate them, move in. They won't go there. Why? Status. It's all about female status. I'm not living in Flint. I'm not going to live in downtown Detroit because I got to have my new house to show it off for my family and my friends. It's got to be in a nice neighborhood because vagina, because status. Okay? Now, I can prove this to you. What's going on right now? This tiny house craze. Tiny house craze. 5 years ago, did you ever see anything about tiny houses? No. I remember a fucking show in the 80s and the 90s called Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous. Or MTV Cribs. Remember that? MTV Cribs? When things were going good and freaking there wasn't any scarcity of resources and all that stuff. MTV Cribs, come in, see Jay-Z's big house, 29 freaking rooms, 45 freaking bathrooms, Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous, show all the yachts and all that stuff. You see any of that on TV anymore? No. Tiny House Nation, Tiny House Finder, Tiny House Builder, Tiny House. Why? Scarcity of resources. The media is trying to make this look like a status thing. It's a hipster, new wave status. Okay, you live in a little 300 square foot house. You're a hipster. You got hipster status. You're a different class of person. Okay, they're all playing to the female status. Let me tell you something. Living in a 150 square foot fucking cabin sucks. I got 1,200 square feet here, 2 bedrooms, fucking big, beautiful porch, and all the acreage I want. And it's still a little bit too small. And I live here myself. I can't imagine living in 300 square feet. Jesus Christ. But They're trying to make it a status thing. Why? They're running out of wood, man. They won't live in these old houses. They gotta have what they want. They want their new houses. It's all based on, we're depleting our planet based on women's fucking whims. They won't change their behavior until they're physically forced to. They will not change their behavior. Okay? Okay, let's talk about another one. Environmental pollution. This comes from overpopulation. More people you got, the more shit you got, the more piss you got, the more garbage you got, the more cigarette butts you got. You ever have a party at your house out in the yard, even if it's like a bonfire and shit, and everybody leaves, Sunday night, heads back home, and you're still fucking picking up cigarette butts till Wednesday or Thursday of the next week, and beer cans and condoms and fucking every other thing in your yard, depending on what kind of parties you have. I have classy parties, so. But women won't do dirty jobs. I talked about this in my wage gap thing. Okay? And they have this mentality, this not in my backyard mentality. That's the other thing. Okay? You're not putting any of that stuff in my backyard. You're not putting chemical waste in my backyard. I'm a consumer. I'm going to use this lipstick and then I'm going to throw it out, in the yard for you to pick up. But you're not going to have any of these dump. You can send that shit to India or you can put it in a landfill in China, but you're not going to do it in my backyard because I live in a nice, ritzy area and I can't have, my friends seeing me living by a landfill, right? Okay? They won't live with their own filth. Women will not live with their own filth, okay? It's disgusting and it's discomforting. The two things that women cannot stand. They have to have their comfort and they cannot be disgusted, right? So, soil, air, and water is just going to keep getting fucking polluted because we can't fucking do anything about it because women have to have their shit, okay? Let me talk about one last thing. And that is from an archaeological standpoint or paleontology or whatever you want to talk about. We are entering the 6th mass extinction. There have been 5 major extinctions on the planet Earth since it's been made. Okay, the dinosaurs and, a couple million years later we had another mass extinction. We are entering the 6th mass extinction. Do you know what is causing the 6th mass extinction of insects, fish, mammals, amphibians, all the other animals on the planet? We are us. There's so many of us that there's not enough room for them. 30,000 species every year. Not 30,000 animals. 30,000 entire species. So a species of spiders, a species of lions, a species of mice, whatever. Next year, gone. Never see that fucking spider again. Never see that type of lion again. Never see that type of mouse again on the planet. They're gone. They disappeared because of habitat loss, because we are putting up parking lots, and we're putting up jewelry stores, and we're putting up, whatever. We're putting up our 3rd Gap or our 4th freaking McDonald's, in our town. So there's no habitat for this mouse or this insect or this spider or whatever. Okay? You've got acid in our oceans, killing coral reefs. I'm a scuba diver, and I can tell you that places that I went scuba diving in the 80s don't exist anymore. There's dives that I've gone on that I have pictures of that I have in my scuba journal that you can never, ever see. I've seen them. Maybe some other people my age have seen them. You, however, will never, ever see them. Because why? Because they're gone. They don't exist anymore. The dive doesn't exist. You can't go there. There's nothing there but sandy bottom of the ocean. Nothing. No coral, nothing. Okay? Invasive species. Just here in Michigan. Okay, I live in Michigan. Zebra mussels. We got zebra mussels in the 80s in the Great Lakes, and it completely changed the Great Lakes. One little invasive species, a little itty-bitty clam about the size of a penny. And, you know, maybe 100 or 200 of them got discharged in the bilge of a ship, and within 5 years, the entire bottom of the Great Lakes was covered with these zebra mussels. Okay? They cleaned out all the water. The water is crystal clear now, but now all the fish that used to use the mucky water as a way to hide, they're all being eaten by tiger muskies and pikes. Okay? All the cool bass and everything that you see, all the salmon, they're all dead. Everybody comes to Michigan. They go up to Traverse City. They go up to Mackinac Island. They want to go salmon fishing. Did you know that 100%, not 99, not 50%, not 25%, 100% of all the salmon that are in the Great Lakes are artificially grown and placed in the Great Lakes. They're planted. No salmon grow in the Great Lakes anymore. Do you know why? Because the little baby salmons are eaten. They get chowed up by pike and tiger muskie. They never survive long enough to grow to adulthood. So they have to be grown in little pens. And then when they get big enough so that the pike and the tiger muskie can't eat them, they let them out into the lake. Okay? So invasive species and overuse of resources. Do women care about any of this shit? Fuck no. As long as I got my Coach purse, you know, as long as I get my freaking salmon dinner, I don't care where it came from. I don't care how much work had to go into getting that salmon on my plate. I want it. So it's female solipsism. Out of sight, out of mind. Okay? Complete and utter disregard for reality and what's going on. Female solipsism. Okay? That is what's going to cause our mass extinction. But as long as she survives, okay, great. Okay? A real good way to think about this, and I'm going to end with this, okay, is that the planet is finite, okay? If you look at this, okay, human beings, okay, my grandfather's still alive, he's still eating. My dad's still alive, he's still eating. I'm eating. My kid's eating. My grandson's eating, right? But every year, you have to plant new corn, new potatoes, new whatever, okay? The food just is linear. Every year, it's all gone. But every year, there's more and more and more and more people, right? So the thing that we got to understand is the planet is finite, and women have to understand this, but they don't, because I'm going to give you this example of a guy that I knew who was trying to teach his wife how to use a checkbook, okay? And she just didn't fucking understand it, okay? She's so fucking stupid. And she used to say to him all the time, and we used to laugh about this because she just couldn't fucking understand it. She would say to him, "But honey, I have checks. I have this entire book of checks. I'll just write a check for it." And he'd be like, "No, sweetie, you don't understand. There's no money in the bank." Okay, there's no money in the bank, but I got the checks. So I can just write a check, you know, for whatever I understand. And he would go, "No, the checks take money out of the bank, and there's no money in the bank. Do you understand, sweetie? There's no money in the bank." Yeah, I get it. There's no money in the bank, but as long as I got the checks, I got money, right? Okay, that's women's solipsism. Their reality is what their reality is. There's no way that you can convince them or make them understand that you need to stop having babies. You need to, you know, have one kid. If you're going to have a kid, have one kid so you don't replace yourself and your husband or whoever you had the kid with. And then as a guy, you got to make sure that you freaking wrap that shit. But anyways, That's my population and my scarce resources. And you have to understand that we're already here, guys. This stuff is already happening. We're already getting scarcity of resources all over the planet. And, you can see it, just from like the tiny house thing. The stuff that you see nowadays on TV, the stuff that you see out in our culture, everything's downsizing, everything's shrinking, everything's getting to be how it was 20 years ago in Japan. If you ever go to Japan and you see how everything's small, and apartments are small, and cars are small, and everything's economical, right? That's how the whole world's going to get to, because we have to. Because with 10 billion people on the planet, it's the only thing that we can do to survive, right? But if we do prevention, and if we change instead of sending kids to school and teaching little boys to be girls and act like girls, why don't we teach little girls that having children isn't the end all, okay? And having children actually is damaging our planet, and doing whatever you can do deviously and tricking men and stealing men's resources and all that stuff, so that you can have children to fulfill this need that you have, is wrong. And it's damaging everyone on the planet. Right? So I got. Rooster out. Take it easy. Next one that's coming up will be generational pacification. One of my favorites. So I'll talk about that next time. Till then, I'm out. Later.